歡迎大家嚟到走進英國課堂就Leo Sir 細說英國教育，又嚟到星期日朝早9點鐘啦。我哋今集好榮幸請到 Matthew 老師嚟到做我哋嘅嘉賓。咁如果你有參加過我哋創意寫作課嘅話，你都應該可以聽過 Matthew 老師，因為佢嘅課程係其中一位最受歡迎嘅，通常48小時之內已經報滿晒啦喺 summer term 入邊。咁今集我哋請到 Matthew 老師可以講一講關於11間英文考試，因為佢本身嘅背景係非常之好嘅，包括名校畢業啦，亦都教過好著名嘅私立學校啦，亦都幫過3間學校出卷。但係詳細我就會交俾 Matthew 老師慢慢講啦。OK？Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning. Hello, Leo.
Not too bad. Yourself?
Very much so.
Good. Thank you very much for coming today to share your experience with us. Can you introduce yourself first?
Yeah, very much so. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, good evening, where you are. So my name is Matthew Holland. I am an English teacher. Important things to know about me is that so when I was about 8 years old, I was in a normal English school, and one of the teachers at the school suggested that my parents look at the independent sector for a kind of an area to challenge me and focus me. So when I was 11, I moved to a prep school in Oxford called the Dragon. And then at that age, I started taking a lot of entrance exams, 11+ exams, 13+ exams. I think I came top of the Magdalen College 11+, of the Abingdon School 11+, the Pates Grammar School 11+. But I decided to stay at my prep school till I was 13. At which point I took the Winchester College academic scholarship and was lucky enough to gain a scholarship to Winchester. I loved my time at Winchester College, and whilst I was there, I had experience of going to a lot of the other big independent schools in England to socialise, to play sports, for academic gatherings. I've retained links with some of my former teachers and made lifelong friends. And I'm actually getting married at Winchester College later in this year. I boarded there for 5 years and had the opportunity to make full use of the school and all it offers. So I've essentially pretty much played every sport and attempted every society and every club there is on offer. So what I'm saying is that I fully understand the independent school world, the boarding school world, the private school world in England, that I can understand can be quite complicated and confusing for somebody who doesn't from the outside. And I believe firmly that an English boarding school experience is like nothing else in the world, an English private school experience with all the different opportunities that are on offer, both academic and extracurricular. So I've been an English teacher for 10 years now, and I've worked in both state schools run by the government, and independent schools. I've worked in mixed schools, and I've worked in single-sex schools with both just boys and girls. For the last 4 years, I've been head of English at 2 different schools in the Reading area. So the Abbey School, Reading, and St. Joseph's College, Reading. So in my role as head of English, I have a clear knowledge, understanding, and skill set to teach any student to any level. And equally, I have written for these schools and marked and adapted and changed 11+ papers, 13+ papers, and any other entrance papers that they offer. Because what you may or may not know is that sometimes schools will offer a 12+ or a 14+ exam for particularly gifted students. So I've worked on entrance papers for the Abbey, St. Joseph's College, and also St. George's College, Weybridge, and Tudor Hall School in Banbury. So I've got an inside-out knowledge of the requirements of these papers and how to maximise a student's potential.
Thank you. Good. First of all, congratulations for that. And as a teacher who have written 11+ English paper for those 3 schools, which part of the 11+ English is the most important?
So for me, I believe that the most important element of the 11+ English is the comprehension section. So I'll explain why I think that. It's because every single independent school in the country has an element of comprehension in the entrance papers at every age group. So I think it's really, really important to learn these skills at an early age because every single English prep school across the country teaches comprehension skills. I think it's more important to actually focus on comprehension than creative writing, because most students are taught a lot more creative writing at a younger age, and it's a lot more, I suppose it's a lot harder to just go into an exam and do a comprehension than it is to go into an exam and do a piece of creative writing, because most students can have a good go at a piece of creative writing, but with comprehension there's a huge range of skills, there's a huge range of questions, and it's very tricky indeed. Another reason why comprehension is so important is because the skills they use in the 11 plus and the 13 plus are the same kind of skills that they'll be using for GCSE English language, or IGCSE English language, in a few years. And what you may or may not know about English universities, English employers, is that the first 2 grades, GCSE grades, that they will look at is English language and maths. So whenever I'm teaching a student comprehension skills, I'm teaching them skills that won't just be useful for the 11 plus or their entrance exam, but will be useful going all the way up to GCSE and equally for life in general.
Thank you. Yeah, we know that comprehension is really important now. So in that case, can you give our pupils or our audience some advice or tips for doing comprehension?
Yeah, very much so. So whenever someone comes across the comprehension paper, for me, the most important thing is to work out quickly how many marks are on offer and how long you have to do the paper, because this varies massively paper to paper, to school to school. I've seen comprehension papers that are worth 80 marks where a student has 20 minutes. And equally, I've seen comprehension papers that are worth 10 marks and the student has 40 minutes. So right from the beginning, it's really important to have that idea, how many minutes do I have to get each mark? And also looking through that paper to see fundamentally how many marks there are per each question. So what you will traditionally find on most comprehension papers is that the shorter questions at the beginning are worth 1 or 2 marks, and gradually they get longer and harder. And so often students will spend too much time on those shorter questions, 1 and 2 markers. So, another piece of advice is not to spend too much time on the shorter questions, and equally to leave one or two of those questions blank if you cannot do them very quickly, okay, is very important, because if you've got a question that's worth 1 mark and you're spending 5 minutes on it, and because of that you ignore a question worth 6 marks, a lot of it is exam technique, and a lot of it is feeling confident and understanding what you need to do for each question. Some questions will need quotations, some questions will need paraphrasing, some questions will need you to use multiple quotations. It's a case of having enough practice and enough understanding, and having the opportunity to ask a teacher questions about it, and to practice things during exam conditions. A combination of that, I think, is really, really helpful, because
there are many different skills inside comprehension, right?
Very much so.
Not just reading and answering questions.
That's the thing. It's not just reading and kind of copying out what you've read. There's a lot more going on with it than that, and it's I would say it's a lot more difficult than creative writing, because there is that sense that most students can come to an exam, sit down and have a go at writing a story or have a go at describing something. It might not be good, but they can have a go at it. But with a comprehension, you have to understand exactly what you're doing, or you can genuinely get 0 out of 25 or 0 out of 40. So normally most comprehension papers are a lot harder than they appear, because also you add in the idea that there are normally several marks per question. And students quite often have a tendency just to maybe write 1 sentence for a 3-mark question, or 2 sentences for a 6-mark question. So it's judging again how much you need to write for each question, specifically what kind of information you need to find and what you need to do with it. Some questions will be looking at the effects of language, and again, a lot of students haven't done that at a young age. Okay, but again, the skills that we look at in comprehension are the skills that we'll be going through into GCSE English language and even actually into GCSE English literature as well. So it's really important to practice as much as possible.
Right now, many of our audience or students just pretty much stay at home, maybe Easter time or even longer. What can the students do at home to practice for comprehension?
So I think fundamentally is having a good knowledge of the school that you want to go to. Now, I think at this age, maybe parents will have an idea that their son or daughter might have several schools in mind. And I think it's really important to be aware that different schools have different kinds of entrance paper. So for an English, they always have a comprehension and a piece of creative writing. But the comprehension sections can be very, very different. Some schools will have a multiple choice comprehension, which is normally quite an easy kind of one. Other schools will have a kind of an almost essay-based one where there'll be a lot of point evidence analysis or point quotation analysis or point evidence explanation paragraphs, which is the technique that most students are taught in English at school. Other papers will have a short bit of kind of creative writing thrown into the comprehension section. So it's firstly, my advice is finding out which schools, okay, and attempting to get hold of as many examples of the school's paper as you can to fully understand what the paper will be like. Now, most schools are quite good if you contact them. Most schools even have example papers on their own websites. So once you've established which school you would like your child to go to, or your child would like to go to, I think it's one thing also as well that I find really important to prepare at home is to read in English, okay, to read widely in English. Now, most independent schools have entrance papers with the comprehension extract being a piece of English literature normally from kind of between 1900 and 1950. What I've discovered over probably looking at several hundred different entrance papers is there's actually quite a few books that come up again and again and again. So the novel that I keep seeing on different schools' entrance papers is a novel called Cider with Rosie by Laurie Lee. And I think I've seen that on at least 30 different schools' entrance papers at one time or another. So it's clear that I think it in the sense of because maybe it's such a good story, or because it's got so much, it's written in such a way that there's lots and lots and lots of material to analyze and evaluate. Another series of books that we see quite a lot of these days is it's called My Family and Other Animals by Gerald Durrell, which got made into quite a famous TV series in England. But what you will find is that quite a lot of the extracts that students are reading are showing, I suppose, quite an old and traditional view of England. You know, this is kind of a beautiful pre-World War II England. Without technology and without many cars and that kind of thing. So just to summarize what I've said, I think it's having a clear knowledge and idea of which schools, what the requirements of the papers are, and then from that point, practice papers, but equally importantly, reading as widely in English as possible. I love Harry Potter, I love Shakespeare, but what I'm saying is that there are so many other authors in English, and it's to read as widely and to build up vocabularies, particularly vocabularies, slightly older English vocabularies. So for example, books written in English 100 years ago will have quite a few words in it that we don't really use in modern English today. So it's important to be aware of that, because quite a lot of English-born students will grow up reading those books at home with their parents, and there's quite a tradition in English in England of certain books kind of being passed down through the family, your kind of Roald Dahl stories or your Enid Blyton stories, that kind of thing. So it's as well as knowing modern English, you also need to know some of the older English as well.
Thank you, Matthew. 如果之前參加我嘅直播你都會知道，我哋15分鐘係一個分享嘅時間啦，跟住另外15分鐘係 Q&A 嘅。如果你有任何問題嘅話，請隨時喺嘅 Facebook Live 入邊直播，就直接留低你嘅問題，跟住我會睇到你嘅問題之後就會問 Matthew。 之前有家長講過，就係喺直播度見到有家長就話求直播之後嘅中文重點。如果你有睇過我 Facebook page 嘅話，你會知道我哋所有嘅直播嘅 video 都會擺翻上 Facebook page 啦。跟住我自己會錄一個精華版擺上 YouTube 嘅。咁直播係大約30分鐘，我錄製嘅精華版會包括晒唔同嘉賓或者我自己講嘅嘢嘅所有嘅精華，大約5分鐘左右，跟住就會擺上 YouTube 咁樣。所以如果你想之後想睇翻 Matthew 老師講嘅重點等等，你可以睇翻之後嘅 YouTube 嘅直播版。咁當然我需要時間錄製啦，咁就可能係2-3個星期之後嘅事啦。但係如果你有任何嘅問題嘅話，咁請可以喺直播入邊隨時留言問。暫時係冇咩問題嘅，但係有嘅話隨時可以入邊問。Matthew, you mentioned about reading as well. So what should students be reading to prepare? You pick up some books like the 2 books you have mentioned before, but can you give a little bit more ideas?
Yeah, very much so. The other authors I've mentioned are rolled. So I think fundamentally students should be starting off by reading some of the kind of English children's classics, the works of kind of Roald Dahl, the works of Enid Blyton, maybe to get their excitement, get their enthusiasm going. I think reading things like the Harry Potter series, okay, that's great fun. It's not the best written, but she uses very interesting, very vivid vocabulary. And again, I have occasionally seen Harry Potter extracts coming up on entrance papers. I think after that point, if they can find anything that's kind of been written between 1900 and 1950, showing this kind of idyllic classic view of England, I think that's a really good starting point. Modern series are good as well to build up vocabulary, because what we've got to remember is that, as well as looking at potential extracts for the comprehension, building up vocabulary skills is really important for the entirety of the entrance exam fundamentally, and being able to kind of show off a student's ability. So I'm not going to say that they should be reading anything at all in English, okay? But I will say that the vast majority of things that they could read in English would be really important. Anything to broaden their vocabulary.
Good. One of the parents asked, can we have the names of the books, more like a book list? You can drop me an email later, and then I'll put it on my Facebook page.
I can definitely put a book list together. That's no problem at all.
You.
And normally with my students, once I've spent a couple of sessions kind of getting to know them, understand them, finding out about their interests and kind of what they like, I will normally then make kind of some individualized book suggestions for them, because as we all know, there are going to be books that appeal to girls, books that appeal to boys, books that appeal to both. So I think it's really important to know the student beforehand.
Yeah, thank you. Sammy asked a question that, would you recommend us to buy the 11+ vocabulary flashcards, or the kids should just read more books?
So I think the 11+ vocabulary flashcards, I think that would be a great starting point, because that gives you something to start with, and then read books after that to build further and further and further. But it's the thing is, with reading, there's unlimited vocabulary out there. But if you start with a set of flashcards and go from that, that's a great idea.
Thank you. 有咩問題嘅話，大家可以繼續問，因為我哋大約係9點半到完結嘅。但係如果冇咩問題嘅話，我哋會提早結束。I saw it from Amazon. Sometimes they got like a 11+ vocabulary books, something like that, right? Do you think that kind of stuff is useful? It's just purely reading vocabulary, just a bit boring, or doesn't help at all?
In all honesty, I think that can be a bit boring, because that's almost like sitting there and reading a dictionary. To any student, I would always recommend reading as widely as possible. With a dictionary, with the internet next to you, any new word you come across in English, writing it down in a vocabulary book. So actually, I think creating your own vocabulary book makes it a lot easier to learn the vocabulary, and is also probably a lot more fun than sitting there and reading through what is fundamentally a dictionary.
So in terms of learning English, what do you do usually? You read a book and then you pick some vocabulary that you don't know, you check the dictionary, and then you create your own vocabulary book. Is that what you mean?
Very much so. Creating one's own vocabulary book is really important. Indeed.
Jamie asked, is there any tips on locating the main points or keywords from the passage in answering the questions?
So that comes with practice. Fundamentally, it's a case of fully understanding the keywords in the question to start with. Okay, so as a starting point, making sure you understand what the question wants you to do. Does the question want you to put something in your own words? Does the question want you to explain the meaning of a word? Does the question want you to pick out a quotation or some evidence? If it wants you to pick out a quotation or evidence, does it want you then to look at the effect of it? Why the author has chosen to use particular words? So I think to go through a passage and pick out the kind of the key words or points, you need to fully understand the question to be able to do that. And to fully understand the question, you need to kind of practice the question, because what you will find, as I kind of mentioned earlier, is that all the different schools in England have all sorts of different entrance papers, and they all want similar things, but they all want them slightly differently. So that's why it's really important to have a good idea of which schools you want to go to. So then in sessions and tutorial sessions, then we can focus in on that paper, to focus in on the exact skills that school wants. Now, to kind of give away a little bit of a kind of a professional secret, that those entrance papers just depend on what the head of English wants or likes at that moment in time. And sometimes what you will find with a school is a new head of English comes in and will want to rewrite or change all of the entrance exam papers. To give you an example for myself, when I moved to St. Joseph's College in Reading, the entrance exam papers had not been changed for 30 years, and there was still multiple choice from the 1960s, and I think they were originally written on a typewriter. So we moved from that and modernized it into a kind of I suppose a more modern but equally more traditional comprehension style extract, followed by a series of questions, which you'll probably find about 90% or so of English independent schools doing today. But as I said, some will have, some will be out of 20 marks, some will be out of 80 marks, some of them will be kind of essay writing, some of them will be picking out quotations. It's really important to know fundamentally what you're doing before you do it.
Thank you. The next question is, they said, I think it's a general question. We only have 1 year to prepare for the 11+. Is there any advice on how to prepare all the papers effectively?
Wow, that's a very big question. For myself, I go back to my kind of my own days, preparing for entrance exams like this, and I think it's really important to use your time effectively. And even 15 minutes, half an hour here and there on each subject is really important. So what I would suggest is that over the course of a week, a student tries to spend half an hour or so on each subject. But I think it's equally really, really important it's not too much at one go. So as in to space it out, an hour and a half, on 2 or 3 subjects per day. Okay, because at that age, I think it's really, really important that students are not overloaded. That and equally from an English point of view, it is this sense where we are learning skills for life, and we need to then practice those skills over and over for those skills to be kind of embedded in the students. So it's not the kind of a case of doing something once and it is sinking in. So to clarify, I think being organized and structured, using your time effectively, repeating exercises and tasks, okay, and equally not being overloaded is really important, and not being overwhelmed by it, because there is a bit of I suppose is it a bit of a myth that every English student has been preparing for the 11+ since they're kind of 3 years old, and I think that's a bit of a myth really, because what you'll find with most English students who go to prep schools, most of their preparation work for their entrance exams will be done in the school in normal lessons. Okay, most English students will have 1 or 2 hours a week of tuition. So it's in the sense of don't feel like you're kind of always struggling to catch up. with other students and with other parents, because quite often that's not the case. And something else that's quite strange and unique about the English independent school world is that nobody ever likes to admit they're doing any work. It's a very English private school, boarding school thing where everyone likes to do brilliantly, but they always like to do brilliantly and pretend at the same time that it's completely effortless and that no one has tried or done. But on the other hand, quite a lot of English boarding school students are working incredibly hard, but doing it very subtly.
I got it. The next one is pretty much a short question. Where can we buy the 11 plus vocabulary flashcards? I believe it's on Amazon, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, good. It looks, the next one, this is the next one. It looks very difficult to understand a poem and to know the meanings behind. Any suggestions to improve?
Very much so. So I suppose we're quite lucky at the moment that probably about 90% of schools are still using extracts from novels in the entrance exam. But you're completely right, the person who asked the question, some schools are starting to use poetry. Poetry is again, it's something that requires patience. It's something that requires practice. It's something that requires reading through, thinking about it, and it's the sense where we as a starting point, knowing and understanding the vocabulary in each poem is important. Now, once the vocabulary is sorted, going on to understanding the figurative language, the figurative techniques, the metaphors, the similes, the alliteration, the onomatopoeia. And again, that's something that can only be done with patience and with practice. And then only after you've understood the vocabulary and managed to pick out those techniques and devices can one start to think about why the author has chosen this language or the effect. Now, I'll be honest with you, this is fundamentally the basis of something called the point evidence explanation or the point evidence analysis paragraph, that students start doing at quite a basic level when they are preparing for, let's say, the 11 plus. And it's a technique that they work on and they work on and they work on, and then fundamentally their GCSE English literature, they have to write essay after essay full of this technique, full of these paragraphs. So I completely agree with you that it's challenging and difficult at first, but something that is practiced and practiced and practiced both in tuition sessions and in every school until a student does it well enough to do well at GCSE.
Thank you. I think the last question here is any suggestion for the readers? I believe it's the same question as before. They're looking for like a book list, and Matthew will drop me. Matthew 老師之後會 send email 俾我，跟住我會擺上 Facebook page 有一個 book list 俾大家去參考嘅。咁好多時候家長之前參加，如果報過我哋創意寫作嘅都知道啦 ，Matthew 老師喺聖復活節之後嘅創意寫作班已經全部滿晒啦。但係今次我哋講嘅重點閱讀理解，我哋喺復活節之後英國嘅 summer term， 我哋都會有一個閱讀理解嘅 course 㗎。但係你可能發覺我哋而家係未放出嚟㗎，因為我哋係下個星期先放出嚟嘅。如果你覺得 Matthew 老師能夠幫到你嘅小朋友去參加11加嘅閱讀理解 Comprehension 嘅話，咁你可以聯絡我，因為佢之後會推出一啲閱讀理解嘅課程，特別係針對11加嘅。Matthew, would you like to introduce the 11 plus comprehension course you're going to do after Easter in the summer term?
Yeah, very much so. So the way that I like to work on my courses is that firstly, kind of getting to know the students a little bit, getting to know, for example, their schools of choice, and then from that we can tailor where we go. So what we do fundamentally is on a weekly basis, we're looking at different papers from different schools. In those papers, we're looking at the different styles of questions that can come up, and we're practicing doing those questions. We're discussing those questions because what we've got to remember is that at the end of the day, the student is on their own in that entrance exam doing that paper. Something else that is a really important aspect of the course is learning how to work under exam conditions, learning how to work under timed conditions, because particularly with that English comprehension paper, a student is under a lot of time pressure and stress from the moment that they open that paper. So it's learning not to be scared. It's learning not to kind of panic. It's learning to look at those questions rationally and logically and go, okay, right, these are 2 ones that are easy that I can do quickly. These are some ones that I need to spend a little bit more effort and focus on. But it's all about maximizing how many marks you get over the time you have. It's a case of over the course on a weekly basis, students will work on a shared Google Doc. Okay, so that the best part about that is that I can see what they're doing, they can see what I'm doing, and we can all see each other over Zoom at the same time. So as we're working, students will receive regular verbal feedback from me and also regular written feedback on the Google Doc. Okay, as well as this, there is weekly homework, okay, which is always based on what we've covered in the session, okay, or preparation for the next session is a consolidation exercise, and they receive feedback for that as well. So every week they'll be receiving several bits of feedback from me, several different things that they can work on, improve on, and each week we are looking to improve in different areas. So whatever level a student comes in at the beginning of the course, you know, I am always confident, and I always know that by the end of that 12 weeks, by the end of that course, you know, they will have improved significantly on whatever paper for whichever school it is that they're going to take. And also, I think it's really important that students go away feeling a lot more confident about their English in general. And through a lot of conversation in the sessions, also building up spoken English is really important too, for other things such as the interview, and also, you know, being in an English school generally.
Thank you. 多謝 Matthew 老師今日嘅分享。如果你覺得我哋今集分享嘅內容係有用嘅話，請俾我哋一個 like， 跟住留言講一聲多謝，咁就已經 OK 㗎啦。最好仲可以 share 俾其他人知道，希望可以幫到更加多人了解英國11加考試關於 Comprehension 嘅一啲細節同埋一啲 tricks 咁樣。Thank you very much, Matthew, for your sharing today. We appreciate that.
No, not at all. It's been an absolute pleasure. So I'd just like to finish by saying thank you so much for letting me speak with you today. I've really enjoyed it. And equally, if any of the parents or students have any further questions, then I'm always available to answer them. I just wanted to finish by saying that I've worked in the independent sector in England for the last 10 years. I am part of a teaching family. Both my mother, both my grandparents were head teachers in English schools. My uncle is a professor of education. So I know the education world in England inside out. I've many friends who are fellow teachers working in all sorts of schools across England, whether it be Winchester College, whether it be Eton, Harrow, Radley, Charterhouse. Normally, I will know at least one other teacher at that school, which occasionally can give me some advantages. The sense of maybe I have an inside knowledge of what those entrance papers, or maybe I'll know a little bit more about the school in terms of help with interviews. But I think it's really important not to be overwhelmed by the English private school world, because I think from the outside sometimes it looks very strange and it's very bizarre, and it's quite a kind of close knit and kind of community, and kind of from the outside looking in, it is very odd. It's brilliant, it's wonderful, but it's very odd at the same time. So it's one thing I kind of want to really focus on is helping a child kind of understand and prepare to go into this world and thrive and take advantage of every opportunity there is.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and keep in touch later.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Bye everyone.
Bye.